Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. I think today we're going to talk about something that we've discussed before and has to do with this right here. That's an intake and it's going to be fuel injected. So it's a Holly, and this intake right here is my son's. He said, "Dad, what can we do to that?" And I looked it over and I said, well, for what you're doing, there's really not a whole lot to do to it, because these areas right here, well, they're not too bad. The work that I would do to this would be back in the plenum, and that's the only bad part that I see about this intake so far is right here. It goes straight down and then it's sharp. So back underneath the plenum here, guys, it's sharp. I can't tell where I'm holding the phone, so I might have you in the dark when I play this back. But here was the question I had given to me tonight. This is for you, Adam. No, not my son, Adam. Well, he's my YouTube son, Adam, I guess. That's what I think I'm supposed to be. He had to be his YouTube dad. That's what he wants. If he wants this for his dad, I want to be his YouTube dad. Anyway, it's like this here. If you have a stock 302, and this intake right here is good for around 7,000, I believe. Now I forget, so I don't want to mislead you with that number for that intake, but that's not really that crucial. That's just something I'm showing you guys. The question that he wanted to know is a dual plane better than the single plane, basically, if he could use a single plane on his application? Well, I don't know the application. I'm going to try and make this easy, because it all depends on what head you have, where you're turning the engine, what gear you have, what compression you have. But I'm going to try and make this easy. If you take an intake like this here, or a torque or two, or something that's good around 15 to 6,500, you're not going to kill the car off with a stick shift. But if you have a stock converter and an automatic with no gear, well, I'll be surprised if it picks up anything. Now, back in the day, I had a low compression Maverick, and I put a torquer on it. It lost bottom end, but it ripped pretty good through the power band. But the problem is the power band petered at 5,000, so it ripped over and it was dead. No gear in the car. So it was probably faster if I left it stock with the 2-barrel. I never got to run the car. Now, I could be wrong. It's misleading sometimes when you put something on. I've made mistakes where I've changed carburetors and things like that and thinking, wow, this thing feels really fast. Going to the track and slowed down. Experimenting with different carburetors and things like that. But it's like this here. On a rule of thumb, if you have low compression, a dual plane is very hard to beat, especially one that's good. But when you start throwing intakes like this on a 302, now this is a Chevy motor, but I'm just giving this as an example. But we had a guy do that before. He brought this intake in. We're like, what are you doing with that? He had an 8-to-1 engine. Oh, this is the intake I got. We're like, you can't use that. Why not? It's cool looking. He's like, that thing will be a mutt. When we showed him the intake that he wanted, that would work, he almost fell over. He goes, that thing's ugly. I don't even want to put that in my car. And it was a little Wheeling 8004, I think the number was on that intake, for a Chevy small block. And he had a little Nissan, 8-to-1 compression. Long story short, he wound up getting that car down to 11s, if I remember right. I do remember it going 1220s with no problem. And then I heard after that, I didn't see him for a while, and the car was in the 11s, if I remember right. The car was light. It was in a Datsun 260Z, I think, if I remember right. This is going back, guys, in the 80s or so bear with me. But the thing is, the intake would have been all wrong. That thing would have been such a dog if he'd have put that intake there on there. Because that's something like the one he had picked out. I think he had the Weedland, I forget what it was called, but it was that type of intake that I just showed you. So anyway, that's the mistake you don't want to make. You want to try to pick something for your power band, and it's very hard to do that sometimes because if you have a stock engine, it's more crucial. Now, I will tell you this. I'm going to give you a couple combinations. This might help you guys figure out what you want to do. My friend had a coupe Mustang, and you know what they weigh. They're low 3,000 or high 2,000s when they're all together. And he had, good seats in it. It wasn't gutted, if I remember right, things like that. It was a regular street car. He had a stick in it, 5-speed, and he had ported 351 heads and a Victor Jr. and an N41 cam. The car ran 1170s, and I think he had 411 gears on it, and headers, and I think a 650 or a 750 carburetor. So that's that combination. So this little car was bone stock, no head work. The engine went in out of another car, and we had a 8-inch converter. Yeah, I wanted to trick people. We had an 8-inch converter and a stock engine, and it was a 4,500 stall. And you might say, that's crazy. Guys my age will say, no way, that thing would never lock up. Converter technology has changed. Sorry guys, out here working again, and now I breathe in my stuff that I was grinding with earlier. But it's good for your lungs. But here's the thing. That car went 1220s. And we at first had 355 gears in that. And that's all was done to that. Was that intake, a 4-hole spacer, which I'll get it for you. This might help you guys out a little bit. Nothing fancy, guys. This is it. It's the one that has the snap thing that comes out of it. You can make an open plenum out of it, or a 4-hole. And it has an insert that presses back in to take up the slack. I like them so much. Here's another one. So I think we have another one laying around here too. So they're $20 or so. You get them in advance. Now, sometimes a spacer will help you, other times it won't. That's something you can experiment with because they're cheap. And they're not that hard to change. One thing you do want to watch out though on a spacer is make sure the gasket that you put on there don't overhang. Because I've seen that happen a lot. People mess around, they'll put a spacer on, and then the gasket sometimes will be thicker than what the spacer is. Some of them are cut thinner. And so always check, no matter what you do, if you put a gasket on something, and if you put an open spacer on and you have a 4-hole gasket, go ahead and cut it out, because I've done that. And you're like, that's not going to hurt nothing. Yeah, till you put it all together, and then it's going, and then you're like, why didn't I know better than that? So, save you guys a little trouble there, in case you want to make the same silly mistake I made. So, it's like this here. Rule of thumb is, pick something that's going to match your car. Now, if you have a heavy vehicle, like a later model Mustang, some of them are up in the mid-3s, you definitely should just go ahead and put a dual plane on there that's going to give it bottom end. More bottom end, the better in these cars when you don't have a lot done. If you're not turning that motor up to use that intake up in the upper power, well, that's going to make the power, it's going to offset the difference, usually with a single plane, is what that's going to do. Usually you'll lose bottom end, even sometimes with a compression behind the engine. So that's one of the things there you want to keep in mind. But one of the other things is this. The weight of that vehicle does matter when it comes to picking an intake. A lot of people don't think about that. Back in the day, they even rated an intake, a dual plane, they would even tell you it was good for low compression, no more than 9-1 on some of them. They would tell you that right on the description. And your single plane would say calls for at least 10-1. They don't do that anymore. I don't understand. But it's all a matter of what you're trying to achieve with that vehicle. Now, I will say this. If you had 411 gears in the car with a stick shift, and you put a torque or two on there, or one like this, it might work out fine. And another thing is, especially with a single plane, try a spacer on that. Usually a 4-hole though. Now I'm going to tell you guys something that might surprise you. It will probably surprise everybody, is this. I have a intake on my son's car. The one that just bought this one. It's on the car right now. I've showed you guys before, and it's a RPM air gap. They use that intake on everything. I've seen everybody brag that intake up. A guy that I really like, that he knows his stuff, I seen him make 500 some horsepower with it, and then he put the single plane on and he made a little bit more, but that was a full-blown racing engine with 11-1 compression. But that intake held in there. But the guy also knows what he's doing with a whole combination. A lot of guys just put intakes on, they're new at the game, they don't know things because they have no reason to if you've never done the stuff and haven't been around it for years. But that intake, getting back to that, is my least favorite intake. I don't like it. The plenum's too small. And you'll say, well, you just said that guy made 500 horsepower with it. Well, the stroker, little 302 base. I don't care if he made 600. I don't like it. And the reason is, just because that intake made that power, I know that little dual plane, that little whittling, or weighing, whatever you want to pronounce it, 8011, would outrun that intake, that air gap. How do I know that? Well, because that's a bigger plenum. But that's not why. It's because I showed you this car. A lot like my car, right, fellas? Well, here's the same car right here. A little different now. Yeah, we changed it a little bit, huh, guys? But getting back to the point I was going to make. Our cars sat the same, my son and I, all but a couple little differences. I had the RPM air gap. He had that little whittling or weighing 8011. They don't make it anymore. And he would spank me. And that's the same people having the same stuff. So if one's outrunning the other one, I have no reason to say that. And I'm not telling you if you have that intake, that it's no good. because it's okay. It's just that I think it was probably 10 horsepower or more difference than that intake that I like. And that's more than one time we've checked that. We've done that a few times. When I tell you something, it's not always one scenario. It's been something that's been tested a couple times. Not intentionally. It's just we had it and we've seen what happened with the vehicle. So it's not like we go out testing stuff. It's that we've seen in the process over the years what pretty much works and what don't. So anyway, guys, I got long-winded about this. And if this even uploads, because I've gone way over my time limit, this was going to be a 10-minute segment. And of course, you know who you're dealing with. So that doesn't happen because I have to get into everything else. Things pop in this head right here. And I just feel like I have to tell you guys if I think of something, because I'm always fucking going to leave something out. And the thing I leave out most is what I was originally on here for to tell you in the first place. So it's like this here. Use your brain. Don't put anything on there because it looks cool. That's rule number one. You know, that's the hardest thing not to do. If something looks big and bad, like this. Okay. And then who wouldn't want that on their car, staring you in the face? Because that thing looked nasty. My son had that on his other car with the valve covers painted black and aluminum heads, and it was nasty looking. It was one of the meanest looking motors I ever seen. But it didn't make it fast. Now that did run good at the time, but that's the one we had trouble with the fuel distribution in that intake. It wouldn't straighten out no matter what we did. And we had a garage guy even help my son with that, and he said there's something wrong. We can't get the fuel right on this car. And that's why I started messing with this, guys. I don't know if anybody remembers. Straight down is where the air and the fuel was going, straight down. And them runners were always hogging all the fuel in the air. So anyway, guys, listen, it's late again. I have to get in the house because it's past my bedtime. And it's been past my bedtime, and I still stay out in this garage and don't give in. And that's my problem, guys. But anyway, I always want to tell you guys, thank you for checking me out. I hope this was helpful. And if I missed the point, if I didn't say what I needed to say, Adam, shoot me a message. I'll answer you that way. And you know who you're dealing with. Terry here, so it's never going to be a straightforward answer. It's going to be a bunch of scenarios involved with it. Sorry about that, fellas. It's just me. Love me or hate me. I hear you, Bean. I know you hate me. I'm messing around. All right, guys. Have a good night, and God bless you. Take care.